Hello, hello. Welcome to Tech Ascent, the podcast where we dive into the trends, strategies, and success stories that are reshaping the tech landscape as we know it today. I'm your host, Oliver Clingain. I'm also the founder of Ascension, the premier biz development partner within tech. Today, we're joined by Frank O'Brien, the founder and CEO of 5Tier. Frank, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Would you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do with 5Tier?
Certainly. So my name is Frank O'Brien. I'm the founder and CEO of 5Tier. 5Tier is a platform that brings together all things marketing and advertising for the purposes of growing a brand and building a business. So what does that mean? You can target your audience on a very micro, hyper-targeted local level to produce one-to-one marketing that's based on what that audience member, prospective customer is most interested in and what they're going to respond to through any channel. So that includes what we would call above the line tactics such as out of home, TV, streaming audio, which used to be known as radio, and then other digital, and then on through the entire marketing funnel. So if someone visits your website, fills out a form, we then can respond to them if they put in their email through email, mobile messaging, etc. So that you have a full funnel view of not only identifying your target customer, knowing who they are, but getting them into the funnel through any channel, and then ultimately knowing if they converted. So that, in a nutshell, is what 5Tier does.
Very cool, very cool. And when you started this company, Frank, kind of what gap did you see or what drove you to want to start your own business?
So, funny little aside, I'll start with is that I never intended to start my own business. We had immediate product market fit. And the gap that I saw, or I would say the challenge that I saw, I had worked at big agencies that were under holding companies. I worked with a small agency that eventually, after I left, got bought by a holding company. And when I left that agency, I noticed that we were just doing whatever the client asked for and not really focused on what was going to work. So we were taking in these big budgets, and if the client said, "I want to shake hands to get 1 million viewers in a day," nobody would say, "Hey, you're not going to be able to do that. Why
Hmm.
don't you invest this budget in something that's going to reach more people more quickly and then look at creative strategy and blah, 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 blah." So, I had stepped down from my position, leading a team of 40 at, the agency that eventually got acquired by a big holding company. And I said to first few handful of clients, "Hey, I got this idea, your creative strategy should include all these different things. And by the way, I know from the inside that this can be done effectively and efficiently on smaller budgets with less time and resources." And those clients hired me. And tech was always at the center of what was going to be a consultancy. So my consultancy, which I didn't intend to start an agency, turned into an agency, and we always built tech. And then fast forward 5, 6 years, we had won all these awards. We were on a TV show, and tech was at the center of the agency. But I had gotten away from the core mission of doing the things that were going to work the best for the clients. Because if a client came up and said, "Hey, I want to give you $1 million to shake 1 million hands in a day, and you can only use one person," are you going to turn down $1 million check to support your agency? No, you're going to take it and see if it
Hmm.
sticks. And that just wasn't at my core. So having a tech background, also, I saw the tech could do things that actually delivered, on a very data-driven micro level with databases of consumers, anonymized until they cross that line that gives you permission. So we launched 5Tier, 7 years after I'd started the agency. So going back 10 years today, which is crazy to say, to basically deliver on the promise using technology and data and media partners that were data driven and connected all in one place. So the problem that we saw, to summarize, was that all these things were in different places. They cost a lot of money, incredibly hard to execute. We had to build tech to do our jobs as a small agency to start better and to compete on these larger stages. And then I realized that the tech was more powerful than the services business at that point.
Very cool. And it sounds like you've stuck with your initial morals from the beginning, which has obviously led to some success throughout your journey. Going through that, you mentioned there just using the example of somebody offers you $1 million. How do you turn it down? Being the founder, CEO, how do you kind of keep yourself grounded and how do you navigate a relationship like that to benefit both sides?
It's a great question. And, the first thought is that it becomes easier over time. It's difficult in the beginning. And, as you were saying, my journey is kind of I've stuck to my guns. I've seen several people that have just kind of taken the exit, I guess you could say, where the name of the agency was Conversation. It was right when social media was blowing up, and the reason it was called Conversation is because it started with marketing and advertising as conversation. If I walked up to Oliver on the street and I said, "Well, Oliver, give me your wallet," probably not going to give me your wallet. But if you saw a glowing billboard that said, "There's this guy Frank walking around asking people for their wallets, and if you give him your wallet, he's going to put $100 in it and hand it back to you," you'd be more likely to give me your wallet.
Right.
So my point is, Conversation, the name of the agency, did stick to its guns and built this whole team and agency philosophy around integrated marketing. If I had just taken the easy money and built it as a social agency, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But it is something that I think is core to individuals, and that's not to say that it's not smart for certain people to take the money and run, and it's not to say that there are some solutions that are built on markets that grow and grow and grow, and people make money and they go off and they live their lives. For me, it almost comes down to I've almost in a way always gotten in the way of my own best interests in search of solving a problem that I can look back on and be really, really proud of. Maybe for less money, maybe for more gray hairs, which I'm very
Hmm.
self-conscious about the gray hairs in my beard these days, by the way.
No, very nice. And Frank, it sounds like you've built kind of a good culture within yourself. You've obviously built a small team with 5 tier as well. Being the CEO, how do you kind of explain that culture, build that culture out with a team?
That's a tricky one because it's very, and I've got the answer, but it's a tricky one because it's very situational. You're dealing with people from different walks of life, people from different, backgrounds with different personal interests, and the answer that I have come to for myself is you've got to be able to compartmentalize and move on, have a hard conversation or celebrate a win, and the next hour, not the next day, like move on. At the end of the day, again, celebrate your wins or lick your wounds and start with a clean slate, every day. And over the years, I've actually gotten, I think, better personally at putting things in the right light personally. I'm not a big self-help person. I don't read books. I don't go to conferences to, stand up and talk about failings. I've just never been that way. But something that was told to me to keep myself grounded recently was, if you're in a bad period, think about how good it's going to be when you're in a good period. And that's on a daily basis. I tend to wake up with all these concerns in my head and what are we going to do today? How are we going to win? And then, someone said to me, well, think about what life's going to be like at 5 o'clock. If you know your high always comes at 5 o'clock, and the second you like get to that point in your day where, you're feeling at ease, like, why don't you just mentally put yourself in that place? So that really helped. But, to get back to your question, it is largely compartmentalizing and putting things behind you and, building a culture that, you know, is somewhat balanced and isn't just all in one direction. I mean, we've seen founders that have gone down in flames because they've been rah, 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 but then behind the scenes, they're not really doing the things they need to drive the business. So,
Hmm.
but it's tough.
Yeah, no, solid, very solid. And it's all driven by a optimistic mindset. It sounds like you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And with that, Frankie, you've shared some great strategies from your founder's journey through kind of internal strategies. Looking kind of external, it's obviously a competitive landscape right now. How's 5 tier going about breaking through the noise?
So, 5 tier has over the years and reinvented itself a few times. So when we launched a decade ago, it stood for the 5 things every business needs because the tools that we have today weren't around then. And the tools that we launched within 2015 weren't around in 2008 when we, started as a consultancy turned agency. So it's constant, reinvention, looking at new product lines, identifying white space. There are some businesses that go into markets. I know that there's a diverse audience for this podcast, but there are some businesses that go into established markets that, have to find a competitive edge, be it features and benefits or price or speed to market. We're fortunate that we've always been at the forefront. A lot of the things that we make our money on are things that didn't exist in the marketplace that we built, such as integrations with programmatic media, above the line programmatic media, connected television, streaming audio, digital out of home. So for us, we're not in an as established market. And, others that enter and, a company that comes to mind is a company that builds prefab homes that ship in a flat pack like an IKEA um, box, but they build these big, tiny homes. They're competing with an established market where there are alternatives. With us, we've been fortunate that we've been able to just continually be ahead of the curve. That also comes with its own challenges, having to educate the market, build a market, get people to adopt something that's slightly different than their traditional ways of doing things. Comes with its own challenges, but it's nice being innovative because you can usually always find those adopters. And I wouldn't say early adopters. I try not to be that far ahead of the curve because, as the saying goes, there's a lot of the road to good intentions is paved with dead bodies or whatever the actual saying is.
Mhm.
So we kind of have to be too ahead of the curve, but we've been fortunate; it's always been just enough ahead that we can find a market of adopters.
Very nice. And Frank, we have a lot of kind of AI founders, AI executives that are kind of in that, we'll call it timeline right now. If they're trying to educate the early adopters to AI and things like that. Do you have any tips for them, being somebody that's kind of been through the trenches with a different technology earlier in the day?
Couple different schools of thought on this, and I'll just tell you my school of thought. Get out there and build. Get out there, test it. I run into founders every day, and I'm like, all right, where are you? Where are you in your product life cycle? Do you know how to actually do this? I was talking to a friend last night, and if and he could answer that question. He didn't know what the next thing was. He's like, I don't know marketing, so I'm hiring a marketing guy. I don't know technology, so I'm hiring a tech guy. But I know how to build this one thing that I've been able to find product market fit with and sell, and now I'm trying to figure out the rest. I think there are so many people who just like sit in a coffee shop or are on their phones like trying to write a brief, or they're using AI nowadays. Like AI is crazy. You could write a
Mhm.
business plan in 15 seconds. You could, and when I use it, I'm actually dumping in live data, so it's coming out with something that's got some type of roots in reality. There are just so many things I see these days, and I'm sorry if this offends some people, but if you have an idea and you just put it on paper and you're going around trying to sell it, it's like those are the ideas that die. It's like find something, figure out how to build it, even if you aren't an expert in that field. Find somebody who is. Like Steve Jobs. I'm not going to say he didn't know how to code or build computers, but Wozniak was that guy.
Mhm.
Like Steve Jobs probably had the vision, went out, found Woz. Woz put together a computer. Jobs went out and became Steve Jobs. So, but still, they had that product. They were in a computing club, in Palo Alto in whatever year it was. So they had the product first before they went out and just sold it. The things that get sold on the back of a napkin, I think, fail more times than not. And it sucks because a lot of times they're great ideas, they get patents. So, to boil it down, um, build something, get out there while you're raising or writing down that plan on a napkin or using ChatGPT, get market learnings. And that's how we grew. I mean, out of the gate, like I said in the beginning, never intended to start my own company, but ended up pretty quickly with 15 people, then grew to 60. Literally in 2 weeks, went from 0 to 15, and in 5 years went to 60 because there was a need out there that we found, and then we figured out the rest.
Mhm. Nice. And with how quickly you scaled, what kind of challenges did that bring? Especially bringing on new team members and things like that.
All of them. You asked a question earlier about culture, how to manage culture, how to manage, conversations with whether it's 10 or whether it's 60. It's like there are these different there's an agency here in New York that used to call them the villages, and it was set up structurally as like a group that had a copywriter and a designer and developer, TV person. This is back in the late 90s, I want to say. But you can look at every pod or village of 5 to 10 people as being an entirely different set of challenges and opportunities and personalities to manage. And then, when you combine and you get larger, in revenue, there are predictable hurdles. And I think in growing a company managerially, there are, things that you don't know that you're going to run into. People having major life events. I had someone who had a dream of living on a boat. They lived on a boat. The day they got their boat, a hurricane hit. So, and they had a newborn. So there are just these things that are always going to pop up that, you're going to have to roll with the punches. And I think, tying in kind of what I said before, it's learning how individually to have a level head, no matter how high the highs are or how low the lows are.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I like it. And like we said earlier, it ties back to just having an optimistic mindset at all times because brighter days are coming, but you've also, when you're on top of the mountain, you've got to kind of brace for the storms.
And to piggyback on that a little bit, in the last, I can't believe I'm going to say this, 17 years that, I've been out on my own, as you might say, even though I've always had a team. 17 years since I started, we first went through a recession that I was too naive to even know was there and coming. And certainly my financial advisors at that point were like, brace for the storm. And I'm like, no, this is great. We're growing hand over fist. We're only 3 months in. And then October 2008, everything goes down. So we weathered that for, solid 5 years. I heard there was something else in between there. We also had the Hurricane Sandy shut down our office at that point. Not a lot of things were cloud based. So we had a server on site that, was completely off for a week. There was that. We had presidential elections. We had a pandemic. There's, as of today, all this other crazy stuff's going on in the world. So you never know what's going to come out of left field. And, but I think it all goes back to that whole optimistic, people have dealt with worse and come out on the other side mindset.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And Frank, we can begin to wrap up here, but what do you think's been the biggest lesson you've learned, whether that be from the mindset perspective, from the general business perspective? What's the biggest lesson you've learned over the past so many years as a founder?
Wow, that's a great question. And I wish we had more time so I could, delay and think on that. What is the biggest lesson? I guess you could boil it down to the common theme of this conversation is just keep moving forward. Get up every day and figure it out.
Very good, very good. And very last question for you, Frank. I've loved talking to you so far. What's on the horizon for 5 Tier with you manning the ship?
So 5 Tier is going to continue to build product, innovate, and like I just said, figure it out. So we're always looking to truly help clients and to find, that next big win. And it doesn't need to be, for me, it's never been about money. Maybe it should be, but has been. And I know that eventually that will come. So it's just continuing to innovate, continuing to try to find that lane that we can just fly down, that really has that product market fit that delivers that, makes us that next big household name.
I love it. I love it. And Frank, like I said, that was my last question for you, so we can wrap it up now. But I really appreciate you coming on, and I'll be sure to tag everything down in the description. But if you want to shout it out now, where can the people find you?
Thanks, Oliver. You can find us at 5tier.com. And then, as you might see in my title, I don't know if that's going to be down there during the podcast, but my Marketing Pro is one of our new innovations that basically layers on AI, which didn't exist when we started, on top of the offering so that you can buy from 5Tier or use 5Tier and all its crazy features to target people on all these different media channels and then convert with by just typing in, hey, I want to reach so and so. Here's my timing, here's my budget, here's my goal, go. So, mymarketingpro.com is got the latest, greatest consumer product for growing your brand and building your business.
Very cool. Very cool. And like I said, for everybody out there listening, I'll be sure to tag everything down in the description. But Frank, once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Oliver.